Okay, before I tell everybody who the guest is, I'm gonna do an apology. Awake Nation follows us, and we follow Awake Nation. And I was supposed to be a guest this morning from 11. Well, no, from 8:30 to 9 o'clock, which is Pacific time. But I went on at 11:30 to 12, which is Eastern time. So it's like I screwed up. That's the first time I ever did that. So I want to apologize to Awake Nation. I know they love watching our shows and everything else, and we love watching your shows. So anyway, sorry about that. Okay, let's move on. Our guest tonight is Ashley Hilt, and she's a podcaster for On Wednesdays. She's an author. She's a cryptozoologist, a Fortean investigator, in which I'm a Fortean investigator, Zandine's a Fortean investigator, and Phil is an armchair paranormal investigator that finds stuff on Google Earth. Um, she's a ufologist, and it takes that name Fortean Investigator because it derives from Charles Fort, who investigated anomalous phenomenon all over the world, and he put out all kinds of books on things that he discovered and researched on. So Fortean investigators nowadays, they do UFOs, UAPs, tulpas, demons, poltergeists, cryptids, extraterrestrials, you name it, they do it. So now I'm going to ask first question. Ashley, what is it that brought you into the world of the paranormal?
Well, it wasn't by choice, I can tell you that. I don't, I don't know how many people choose to do this, but I was a pretty diehard skeptic when I got into this crazy world. I had the best way I explain it is a string of synchronicities that happened during my visit to the Moth Man festival in September of 2019. And just from there, life continued to be, well, utterly strange. And I couldn't really ignore it. So I just jumped right into it. And turns out I guess I'm really good at it. So here we are.
Well, that's fantastic. Zandine does a lot of investigations on UFOs. Zandine, I know you probably want to ask Ashley about her UFO investigations.
Yeah, well, so what's your favorite modality? Do you like to meditate? Do you like to just speak in your heart? Do you like to play music or all of them? What do you like to do to contact?
Um, it really depends. I'll be honest with you. I haven't really found what works. I have
Uh-huh.
been doing this for about 5 years. One of the
Okay.
things that I do when I conduct, a physical investigation is try new methods. Right now, one of the things I'm trying to work on is contacting a specific entity. People may have heard of this person. It's Indrid Cold.
Oh yeah,
And
Ingrid Cold from
yeah,
Mothman.
well,
Okay.
yes and no. But yes, we'll say that. That's where most people know him
Nah.
from. It's a very intimate case for me, or has become an intimate case because I happen to get very close to the family. So for the past year or so, I've been trying to make direct contact with Indrid because at this point, there's nothing more we could do besides that. And of course, I have gotten creative with it. I've consulted people who dabble in the occult, right? I've looked towards necromancy. I've looked towards, asking different gods and goddesses, which is, again, not really something that I personally subscribe to. But
Yeah.
I'm kind of willing to try anything if it'll, get me results.
Okay. Okay. I said, well, that's good. I mean, that's a natural answer because you see it, you want more of it, and you try you try all kind of different things, and so, but interesting experience I had. I went down to Los Angeles just trying to see some stuff, and I met this older man that the people in the park they were fascinated by him. I guess they thought he was like a hubris, and so they were like, "Can you talk to him?" But He was about like some serious meditation and prayers and like his heart flame. That wasn't what he wanted to see, like the UFOs and entities, but he said he would see that just as a byproduct. And he started talking about these different um like prayers. He would pray like for the Van Allen belt radiation, for the kids, like these beautiful things. And things would happen around him like that. And so it gave me an idea of like, hey, you can make your own prayer, or you can, your string of whatever gets you engaged and gets that frequency where your body, you can be read from the sky, I believe, to where it changes colors, depending on what mood you're in, like a mood ring. And if you're open for contact, I think you can get it.
Yeah, I'm definitely, I've been looking into lately CE5, which is,
Yeah.
it's going to be controversial, but I hate Steve Greer. He's terrible. He's a grifter, but it doesn't mean that that method is incorrect. A lot of people have had a lot of really promising results with it. But I've honestly, I've been warned by people to conduct yourself with caution when doing something like CE5 because it does garner results. And so,
Well, yeah.
I'm like, well, I'm super interested. Am I ready for that? I mean, I think I am. It's just, another problem comes into play. Everybody says don't do it alone. I'm not going to drag my regular friends who aren't into any of this stuff into a traumatizing experience.
Yeah.
So
They'll
just
hate you
trying to find a
later.
group. We're supposed to do one here in October in West Virginia with a lot of other weirdos. So that'll be exciting to see what comes from it. But again, this is just all stuff that I've kind of come across on my journey trying to
Yeah.
contact an alien.
I got a friend in Alabama who used to live out here, and he so wanted to see it so bad. Like he see pictures and different things, and he literally meditated his way right into like his own experiences. So like now, he can send you something that's just sitting there, and he's saying what he says. He really wanted it. It's always like that. You
Yeah.
can get it anywhere by yourself, pretty much, but it's always good to have, somebody else out there, well wishing, positive energy, stuff like that. But the CE5, it's guys in LA that have been doing it like for like 80 years, and they used to joke with me. They go, "Oh yeah, Stephen Greer," go, "Yeah, man, pay him $3,000, and then come see a satellite come in the desert." They used to
Right.
joke, but still the modality, like I said, I think whoever you are, you'll find your way, through trial and error.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm open-minded. I'm open to the experiences. And I think that at the end of the day, it's really all you need. So I'm here for it, whatever it is. I'm here to try whatever, as long as it works.
Be interesting to see what you get. I'll be interested in see, because everybody has like different like stuff that comes to them. It's all interesting. You might get purple things, gold and blue things, where I only get like green and red things sometimes. It's a trip. Okay.
Philly,
What?
Phil's probably got some questions too.
Sure.
Yeah. What's CE5?
CE5 is like it's kind of a way to summon an experience. Most of the time, summoning UFOs directly using meditation. Now, I know Greer has, God, there's like an app you can download. It's like $10, right? You can buy an app. It's a CE5 app, and it has like certain tones that you can play while meditating to kind of induce one of these experiences. So, the term itself, CE5, is one of the forms of contact. There are it's a close encounter of the fifth kind is what it refers to, and there are different levels of this contact. I believe it was J. Allen Hynek who initially made that scale, and I believe he only made it on 3 different levels. And now, as other people have kind of delved into ufology a little bit, they've kind of expanded on it.
Oh yeah, I work with I used to work with um, I can't even think of her name now. Sylvia Brown's secretary, Holly DeLauder. And Holly DeLauder was herself a psychic medium. And when we did an investigation in Mount Shasta, she was able to detect UFO activity. And we stopped at this one point at Mount Shasta, and she says, "Paul, start taking pictures of me." And I said, "Why, Holly?" And she goes, "There's something behind me."
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And I snapped the photo, and right behind her was a disc-shaped UFO. And this is Holly Delauder, the secretary of Sylvia Brown. And then one of our other psychics, she was in the car with me, Wishfire, and we're driving along, and she says, "Pull into this parking lot." I go, "Okay, why?" She goes, "There's something in the sky." Again, I didn't see anything with my own eyes. And she starts snapping a photo, and sure enough, she gets three UFOs, UAPs, in a V formation. And that photo actually went viral all over the world. It was so clear. So some people really do have amazing abilities.
Wow, that's very cool. I don't think I'm familiar with the photos, but I'd like to check them out.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I got them posted all over the place. I know Zandine's seen it. I think Phil's seen it. So
Very cool.
You mentioned necromancy.
Yeah.
I've heard nothing but negative about that in particular. What's your experience with that, or how have you used it?
I mean, I think I know what you mean by saying you've heard negative, but that hasn't quite been my experience. It's been very unreliable. So I mean, using different tools of divination is not something that I've strayed away from. I own a multitude of Ouija boards. I've used them to no result. We prefer to use the spirit box when we go out and investigate. I have a team, or had a team of investigators at one point. And we've gotten varied results. It really just depends. I don't necessarily know if we're contacting the dead. I don't know what we're contacting. I have a pretty controversial take on ghosts in general. I pretty famously don't think that they're dead people. It makes a lot of people upset because I think they feel like I'm invalidating that experience. But so I have that kind of translates over into whenever I'm trying to, make contact with something. Because stuff like the spirit box, I don't think I've never gotten a Ouija board to work, for one. I'll say that. I've used them as a teenager, used them as an adult, have never had any results. But with the spirit box, I don't really think it's so much something else is talking to you. It's very much just a radio wave that's clicking through very quickly. And I think when you catch certain phrases and things like that, it's not necessarily because of something trying to contact you. I think it's very synchronatic. And I think it's just things that you kind of need to hear. So I've only really found, any type of necromancy so far to be more introspective rather than the result of something else. Now, could it be influenced by an outside influence? I'm sure. But there's just, to me, not enough data to back that up yet.
So you don't think they're dead people? You think it's like a radio frequency? Where do you think that frequency could be coming from?
Well, the radio. I mean, it's just the radio. That's what it's playing. It's just going through the radio station, just like you would in your car, just like you would on an old radio.
I know, but the old radios have stations and DJs and playlists and things like that. I mean, Is that literally what we're picking up, or is this an intelligence from some other dimension? What's your thoughts on this? What's the controversial theory?
I gotcha. Again, could be influenced by a specific entities, but I can't say for certain that that's what it is. I think it's just because you are looking for particular phrases, so therefore your brain is kind of already dialed into what those phrases might look like. And so if you catch one of those phrases, during what you're doing, then it's going to seem significant at the time because you're already kind of pre-prepared to take on that type of message.
Yeah, I think you're saying it's almost in a sense like when you're going through something in life and a certain song comes on the radio and you automatically think, oh, this is a message. Somebody's telling me something, through this song, only, it's not quite that.
The universe is talking.
The universe is talking to me. Exactly, Paul. Thank you.
Exactly. And while that's how I got my start in this, like I said, I started because I had my own string of synchronatic events, which were, to me at the time, felt too significant to just be coincidence. I'm also, I actually want to prove something, so I can't throw the science out and go, well, coincidence doesn't exist. That's just not true. Or at least it would be silly of me to assume that that's not true. So I'm not pretending to know what these messages are, who they're coming from. Those are just kind of some things that I theorize. So I could swing one way or the other, just waiting for something solid enough to pop out to sway my opinion either way.
Do you believe in an afterlife?
I don't really, just because I don't really think it's my job to know if there's one. I'm here and I'm here and I'm now and this is it. I don't really waste time wondering what's going to happen when I die because it's going to happen anyway. So I can't stop it,
I think I read a little bit of your on your little bit of your Facebook today. So you're not so much a ghost hunter, or you wouldn't call yourself a ghost hunter. You're more into studying cryptozoology or ufologist. Is that more of your main interest?
I would say probably ufology would be the higher swing there. It does depend on what it is I'm looking into at the time. I don't choose what I study. It's simply brought to my attention, and then I will deep dive it until I hit the brick wall, and then jump into the next rabbit hole, and rinse, wash, repeat. So, um, but as far as like the paranormal itself goes, I mean, I would rather be in the woods looking for Bigfoot than I would be in an abandoned home.
Right.
That's just like my general interest. So again, it really just depends. But I think ufology kind of covers more of my own theories about a lot of this stuff. But that's why I prefer the term Fortean, because I'm not going to throw anything out. I'm very open to the possibilities and understand that this is a mystery that's older than me and you and everybody that's come before us, and it probably will still be here after we're gone.
Absolutely.
Okay, Ashley, I got something good for you that you might take your teeth into. Is let me ask you this: ufology. Are you more fascinated by onboard encounters, on ground encounters, just to encounter other beings, different craft, variety? I'm sure all the above, but which one kind of gets you the most?
I gotcha. I'm kind of bored of different craft. You know what I mean? Like, you see a new
Yeah.
UFO video and you're just like, I've seen it,
Yeah, right.
It's not that it's not interesting. It is. I'm just burnt out on it. I definitely prefer more one-to-one encounters, which is why
Right.
I picked up the Injured Cold stuff and started,
Okay.
looking into that. So I live in Dayton, Ohio, which is known for something in the UFO world. So I'm 10 minutes away from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I have talked to, God, everybody from every possible area that I could that works there. From the janitors all the way up to special ops that work at the NASIC building. I've heard so much. I'm not really interested in the government side of it anymore, which is why, like, the UAP disclosure stuff, I'm over it. I refer to it as UFO edging. We're never gonna get what we want.
Yeah. I mean, your truth is your experience. I mean, after you probably next, I know Paul will probably ask you, but I'm sure you've had some experience that led you to want to go further than this, because your truth is your experience. So like they're talking about this stuff on YouTube or TV, and you're like, but like I'm interested in like the beings, the technology, like them talking to people, the different ones, and everybody remembers October 17th, 1973. If you're into ufology, that's one of the best days for humanoid contact. A lot of craft were coming down, people were seeing them. A whole lot happened in that day, right around Pascagoula. The same time.
Oh yeah, definitely. That the direct interaction is always fascinating to me, and especially as somebody who I've never had a direct interaction with one of these entities, which is why I'm trying to have one with Indrid.
Yeah.
But because I've been very close with people who have, My part of it has kind of been more to get to know these experiencers and kind of get to know them more psychologically than anything else, just to see, if their stories can be taken down. Is the skepticism legit on this? Should people have a reason to not believe these people outright? And so far it's been pretty 50-50. I can have pretty hot takes on injured cold sometimes, but because it's been an active investigation that I've been working on for years, man, that opinion changes so much depending on what's happening. But obviously stuff like that is super interesting. Well, I mean, one of my favorite encounters ever was Sam, the stand down clown. It's just so ridiculous. Um, the Vegetable Man of West Virginia. I mean, it's so crazy. Nobody makes that up. you know, Nobody
Right,
makes up
right.
these stories. Some of
Not
them
a
are just
trend.
so out there, and they're so different in the variance of it that, even if we try to just take one of those creatures and go and try to pick it apart and figure out the motive and why the hell are they here to begin with, we can't, because they all have different reasonings, because they're all different species and they come from different places. I find that part of it exciting.
Right. I really do.
Um, Ashley, what are some of your best investigations?
Um, well, that's a good question. I think probably the first time I ever took my historian, which is now my historian, out. So she was a skeptic. She'll she'll still tell you to this day that she's a skeptic. She doesn't believe in any of this, but she thinks it's cute and fun. And it's important to have somebody like that. So that way, it balances me out, right? That way I just don't believe in everything just because I want to. But the very first time I ever took her out anywhere was we were in the TNT area in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And normally, so during COVID, I did a lot of tours down there, tour people around, and that was kind of a way to make money at the time and got me out of the house, and I love it down there. So I took her down there, and she wasn't quite on my team at that point. But we do the usual stuff. We go to the museum and we go see the statue. We go have a Moth Man pizza. It's all fun and games. Then we go down to the TNT area. And for people that haven't been down there, it's a weird place. I'm not saying Mothman lives there. He doesn't. But it is a very strange area. Um, there's all these concrete igloos that are down there. If people that don't know, that the military had installed back during World War II, because they had a pop-up munitions factory, and they were storing the munitions there in these concrete igloos. Well, once the war was over, of course, they cleared some of them out. Some of them still have munitions in them and will blow up to this day. But now you're left with these big concrete igloos. Well, some of the property was given back to the families at the time that the military had bought it from, so it's private. So there's only one area that you can legally go to. Otherwise, you're trespassing, and I wouldn't do that in West Virginia. They will shoot you. So the one that's legal, the one that you can tour, we're down there. And while you're walking up to it, so the way it works is you're in the middle of, it's now a nature reserve, is what it is. And so you're in the middle of woods everywhere. And you drive down this long stretch of road, and you can see along the road these little kind of spots that are carved out in the tree lines. Well, if you were to park there and walk back, that's when you start hitting the igloos. So the one that is legal, you walk down it, and right beside you is like a swamp, basically. It's not a swamp, it's just a body of water. But it's very still, and it's completely covered in green algae. It's really disgusting. Don't touch that water down there. You will get cancer. And so we're walking down, and we hear bullfrogs, a lot of them. And when you look at the water, you can see there's a lot of bullfrog, heads sticking out. We're kind of watching them for a minute. We're enjoying ourselves. Every once in a while, they'll jump up out of the water and jump back in, and there's no ripples because the water's so still and thick with that algae. And then we look over, and there's a deer. We see a deer standing kind of off in the distance. And she goes to pull her phone out. And I look at her. I take my eyes off the deer, look at her to go pull her phone out. Then we look back up, and the deer's gone. Well, we kind of walked more towards that area, and what we realized was that that deer was standing right in the middle of that lake. and there was just nowhere, no, they couldn't get to the middle of the lake on land. There is no land. Since then, she kind of took it upon herself to really map out this whole area. That was the big project we were working on, learning that area like the back of our hands, and we have. And to this day, that deer walked on water to get to the spot it was standing at. That is not shallow water. We would have heard it splashing away. It's just not possible. And as much as she likes to say that she's the skeptic, that's what got her into it. And I know it did. You know, a ghost deer, I don't know what it was. It was very strange.
Interesting, interesting. Actually, we also too, we had our own Mothman sighting here in Sacramento, California, which was featured on Monster Quest on the History Channel. And something like 9 witnesses now have seen Mothman on our Tower Bridge.
Okay.
But
That's interesting.
nothing bad has happened, and you know, because they say that Mothman was a harbinger of doom, and Silver Bridge collapsed, and there's something like 43 people died. Nothing bad has happened in Sacramento.
What's the story with this vegetable man of West Virginia? I've never heard that story before.
We'll go there. I'll tell that one real quick, but I will say, you guys want to continue to listen because I actually saw the Mothman myself, and I'll tell you that story in just a moment. So,
Oh, okay.
but Vegetable Man. So the Vegetable Man happened, I believe it was also in the 60s. It might have been the 50s. A gentleman was out hunting and he saw some UFO, some type of UFO, some craft that landed in the woods where he was. So he went to go investigate. When he did, he found a strange type of leafy creature. It was very large and had these very strange eyes that were like, when you think of like a cartoon character being hypnotized and they have those like swirly eyes, it had that, but they were like red and orange. And it spoke to him. It told him, I mean you no harm. I just need assistance. I need help. And so as the man starts kind of drawing closer to this creature, it reaches its hand out to him and grabs him on the arm. And this ended up being a horrible mistake because when the creature grabbed onto his arm, the creature had these long, like needle-like things coming out of its fingertips, and they sunk into his arm. And this thing allegedly sucked his blood through its needle hands, released him, and then went on its merry way. And, like I said, this story is so out there. There's really nothing like it that's happened that, this guy had no reason to make it up. I mean, it's so bizarre to me. Of course, he didn't go on to write any books about it. He just shared his encounters locally. Everybody talked about it. Everybody made fun of him. And then he, died eventually. And that was the story.
Yeah. Interesting. Tell us about your Mothman encounter.
Okay, we'll talk about Mothman. So this actually happened way before I did any of this. It was the summer of 2016. I don't know if it was June, July, August. I don't remember. So I was at a friend's house and we were having a sleepover. I was probably, I should have been around 25 at that time. And, I like to tell this part because I like to be honest with you guys. We were making pot brownies and we were eating said brownies. And so that's why I was staying at her house that night. We were getting really high. We were drinking also. This wasn't something that was abnormal for us. This is something that we did very regularly with our time. And so as the night is kind of winding down and we are, going to bed, trying to go to bed, I'm trying to sleep on a couch and I end up seeing, well, I don't end up seeing anything yet. I just kind of start freaking out. And unless you've smoked pot before, which probably most people listening to this have, not to stereotype, but hey, you can do that sometimes, right? You start getting real paranoid and anxious and you're like, what's going on? So one thing that you'll kind of do is, one thing that I've done is pick a spot to like look at and kind of ground yourself and focus on for a minute. Like kind of tell yourself, look, I'm just really high. It's okay. So the spot that I ended up picking, so this TV cabinet that was catty corner to the room, it had the cabinet doors were open on it, and there was about 2 feet from the top of the cabinet to the ceiling, and I kind of looked at that empty space up there. And while I'm sitting there focusing on this empty space, something starts to form in the corner of the room, and the way that I'm going to describe it makes it sound like it lasted longer, but I'll tell you that's all probably happened in under a minute. At first, it's kind of like a weird black mist. It's like, and then it starts to be like a head. And then that head kind of starts to turn into what I thought was shoulders. Then it starts to turn into what I thought were arms that were coming off of this thing. And they start overstretching over the top of the ceiling and kind of getting closer to me. And then they start coming downwards. And I realize that they're not arms, they're wings. And I don't know if that kind of pulled me out of what was going on at that time, but I was like, I'm gonna leave. So I did. I got up, I went to her room, I woke her up. I'm like, look, you gotta wake up, I'm freaking out. And she's laughing at me and she's like, oh my God, you're just really high. And she stayed up with me. I did not tell her what I saw and did not talk about this until 2021 after I had started investigating the Mothman, when another person had relayed an extremely similar experience to mine, and it just kind of went off like a light bulb. And I knew at that time that's what I saw. And I know what people are thinking. People have said it. How do you know it wasn't a shadow person? How do you know it wasn't a ghost? How do you know it wasn't a demon? I don't know, you guys, but something inside of me just knows. And that's the best way that I can explain that.
What?
Interesting.
Yeah, Ashley, a lot of people like they ask you when you see a UFO, how do you know it's not a demon or whatever it is? They ask you, how do you know it's not this or that? But I always tell them, it's like if you pray to something or if you have a significant other, and like if you can't tell who that is in the dark, then that's like a personal spiritual thing. A lot of times people don't really understand. But yeah, if you reach out for something and you're worried about getting taken over by a negative entity, the way you reached out wasn't even grounded in the first place. So like as you get more experience with just the way your approach in reaching out to those things can limit, what is coming at you anyway. So, but anyway,
Yeah,
what do you
no,
think, Phil?
absolutely.
I'm sorry, Ashley.
Well, I mean, the first reaction is was it marijuana induced? I've had panic attacks myself, but I don't think I've ever hallucinated. So that part of it, seems like, yeah, it's definitely an interesting experience.
Yeah, and I've deep dived it. I mean, people that smoke pot, they know, right? We know, right? Because we've been pushing to legalize it for years. But medically, marijuana does not cause hallucinations. It doesn't. The only time it would do that is if you are very severely allergic to it. And I'm 33 years old and I've been smoking pot since I was like 15, and I've never been allergic. This has never happened before. I've done edibles. People are like, well, edibles make it's different. It's a different high. You're right, it is. But again, I had done this was like a nightly ritual just about with us. This is what we did, and nothing like that ever happened. And you guys, I have taken 9 hits of acid before in one go. I've done shrooms, I've done ketamine, I've done all the hard drugs. I don't do any of that now, but I've never, out of all, if drugs cause stuff like that, I'd probably still be doing them, right? But they just don't. It doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, Timothy Leary said that LSD opens your third eye. So I don't know.
It just changes your perception of things. You see things moving that you don't normally see moving. That's why blacklight posters. If you've never done anything crazy, you don't know what a blacklight poster's for. You just think, oh, that's a cool looking poster. Well, blacklight posters actually move if you're on a hallucinogenic.
They're extra cool.
Yeah, they're extra cool. But say look at a wall of ivy. If you're on something like that, and the whole wall of ivy seems like it's breathing or rolling. So those are the type of hallucinations. When people say hallucinations, they don't. It's not like all of a sudden, some little green man pops up and starts having a conversation with you. It's like Ashley said, if it did that, people would be doing a lot more of it, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that gets lost in skeptics like to use it. They like to use that as an excuse. Oh, that group didn't see this because they were drinking. When the hell have you ever hallucinated while drinking? I haven't.
I mean, you have a different perception, like, oh yeah, that girl really likes me. It's like, no, maybe not.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's
But
that's
no,
totally different from
yeah,
having a
exactly.
vegetable man sink his needle fingers into you, you know?
Well, have
Yeah.
you ever had an experience with Mexican sage, salvia divina?
I
Okay.
have not. I had the chance to. I didn't do it. I was afraid.
I this is a long time. This is going back 20 years ago or so, but this is back when it was still marijuana was still illegal and relatively hard to get. You know, this was in California, but it was still, I want to say, early 2000s. So medicinal passed in '96, and a lot of people didn't have their cards. It wasn't that easy to get still, even in California. And so I was at a head shop, and the guy behind the counter says, "Have you tried this?" And I said, "Oh no, what's this?" You know, because they, of course, they had all the fake marijuana in there, which nobody wants. And so I bought a little thing and I took it home, and I tried one hit of it. And have you ever seen like the Matrix scene where he takes the red pill
Oh
and
yeah.
everything pixelizes, and all of a sudden his voice like almost it becomes like almost like a mechanical, sounding voice type thing. Well, that basically happened, and it almost seemed like I was looking through the eyes of a fly. Where you ever see like all everything's a little cell,
Oh
but it
yeah.
was like everything, but it was like they were multiplying quickly and making a little popping sound with each one until it was just like thousands of them, and then I felt like needles were sticking into my skin, almost like a plant type thing. And I had, because of the taste of the plant, even though I had inhaled it, I felt like almost like a plant was sticking into my arms like that. And that voice, I remember like yelling out and my voice making that type of sound in the Matrix when he does the red pill. That
Oh no.
so it was about a 10-minute bad acid trip, and I quickly afterwards gave it to a friend and said, I don't know if I should tell you to try this or not, but I'm never going to do it again. So if you want, go. And he had almost the same experience. So and that's legal, or it was.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, I was afraid to do it. Yeah, see, that's why, because I've heard those stories. And we were at my friend's parents' house. We're teenagers, and their parents were home. I was like, oh no, I'm not, not doing that.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy stuff. I can imagine being a parent and walking in on somebody freaking out on you.
Well, we used to do our. I mean, the parents. I don't know if they knew. We haven't really brought it up to them now. Now, like the one girl's parents, like her dad will smoke pot with us and stuff, and that's fine. But like, we would drop acid and do ecstasy. And one time, one of our friends went and told his mom that he was tripping on acid, and she cried. It was terrible. Anyway, that used to be the kind of life that I lived. So I'm just saying, guys, I have experience with drugs. A little bit of pot brownies is not going to induce a hallucination like that in someone like myself.
No, I believe you. I believe that.
That's
I
just
don't know
something
what's the
people
shit.
always, huh?
Go ahead, Zadine. Sorry.
Oh, no, no, no. I'm sorry. That's just something people always say to others, to try to rule out or try to disqualify what they saw, just part of some people's checklist. But to a real person who's seeing stuff, it's not going to make a difference. I'll put it to you this way. If you had somebody that was at your house that stole something from you and they said, oh, I did it because I had a drink or I smoked a joint, they may you wouldn't accept that as an excuse. So you're not going to accept, oh, I saw this because I smoked some weed and had some drink, mixed together. Now what Phil said about hallucinations, but even still, there's a limit to that. You're not gonna like imagine that a craft, was outside. You walked outside to a craft, it took you up, or you talked to some beings. I mean, maybe, but at that case, at that point, you're gonna stop taking drugs and you're gonna start taking medication. So
Right.
If,
No,
if they had stuff like that, I want it. Let me know what it's called.
yeah, where are they getting that from? I don't. Because I'll tell you, this was also before weed was legal, and I'll say that much. It was just some dirt weed. Like, it wasn't even that good.
yeah, I need some swag, huh?
It was some shake that we could barely afford with little $20 we pulled together.
Give you bad breath. Okay.
But the way that I see it now, you guys kind of mentioned, we're talking about the Mothman and obviously the common belief surrounding the Mothman. Being somebody who's researched a lot, who's talked to firsthand witnesses from the 60s, I'll be talking to one this weekend again, one of my good friends, Lydia Sigmund. Um, there's this weird rumor kind of about it. There's weird lore about it, which isn't necessarily true. The Mothman wasn't even hardly seen around Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It was mostly seen in Ohio. It was never seen on the Silver Bridge. I firmly believe that John Keel told this story of the bridge and the Mothman and all that to kind of rid himself of the investigation. It took him over 10 years to write, or I'm sorry, a little under 10 years to write the Mothman prophecies. Um, it's not that it's a bad omen. And as somebody who's experienced it personally and has talked to other people who've experienced it, what I'm leaning more towards is this is kind of, I like to call it the tower moment. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with tarot, but the tower card and a tarot deck represents breaking down your foundation, your tower collapsing, and then having to rebuild that foundation up again. And when you have this type of encounter, it rocks your world. It changes your life. While nothing negative happened to me immediately, I actually ended up experiencing a string of really positive changes in my life. So your tower moment is kind of what you make it. You either throw yourself into the change and you grow with it and you come out better for it, or you keep experiencing that downfall over and over again until you do. And so I think that people kind of can get this negative, this negative feeling from this type of experience because it kind of induces that change. And I, to a T, have experienced the same thing that these other experiencers have. And it's really amazing, and it's really sad that it's so misunderstood. But man, unless you're really into this topic, you just don't get it.
I never understood the it's gonna sound like a diss, but I'm really not trying to make it come off that way. But other than when the movie came out, I had never heard of the Mothman before. I grew up in New Jersey, so we grew up with the New Jersey Devil. And the Jersey Devil is interesting because one, it's we're the only I think professional sports team that has a professional sports team named after an urban legend or cryptozoology, whatever. It's the Jersey Devil hockey team, right? Stanley Cup winners. The other thing is that it's based on an actual family, the Leeds family from Smithville, New Jersey, in an area called Leeds Point. So I mean, we know it's a legend. It's probably not true. There was mass hysteria, especially in the 1930s, about sightings and all these different things. But it's based on a family that actually existed and one of the founding families of New Jersey. Bigfoot, I could see that's, fascinating because it's been all over pop culture, at least since the 60s, maybe before that. The Mothman just kind of came out of nowhere. And when that movie came out, at least, the way I see it anyways, I didn't grow up in that area. So is this something you grew up with, or it's just you saw the movie? When did the Mothman even become a thing? And what is so scary about it? It's like, just before a bridge collapsed, somebody saw a moth figure and turned this into a story somehow. I don't understand the whole thing, really.
That's okay. So I did not grow up with this. I'm about 2 hours away from Point Pleasant. I got into cryptozoology because I was into Bigfoot. And I very much was in line with thinking that it's an undiscovered species of ape. And we have undiscovered species of animal because we're still discovering species of animals to this day. So, I was really into cryptozoology because I was into animals. I like zoology. And so, you kind of hear about Mothman from that. I never really got into studying it because I just thought, well, like all the skeptics think it's a sandhill crane, right? It's an owl. It's something explainable that people were seeing. I was invited to go to the Mothman Festival in 2019 with a friend who had a YouTube channel, pretty big YouTube channel, and they wanted to make a video for their YouTube channel. And so when I went, I walked into this not believing in it at all. I was supposed to play a joke character, the quote unquote cryptozoologist in this video, and thought it was all bullshit. This was again 2019. Remember, this was 3 years after I had my sighting, and I still didn't believe it at that point. So, as the story goes with the Mothman specifically, there's a 13-month period that the story people know between November 1966 until December 1967, where people were seeing this strange humanoid creature along the Ohio River. It kind of became big because a ufologist at the time, who was a journalist named John Keel, had been tracking UFO sightings in that area. And a famous encounter happened with the Mothman, where this creature chased two young couples through what is known as the TNT area through Point Pleasant, West Virginia. John Keel got wind of this story and went down there to go investigate that. While he was down there, the people in the area finally kind of had somebody to share all the weird things that were happening around there with. And so they started flooding him with stories of UFOs. A week before this happened, we had the Indrid Cold case where Woodrow Derenberger had met Indrid Cold and went on the news to give a press conference about it. And that was only 40 miles from that area. And then, of course, you had the Mothman himself. So he started, making regular visits there. He brought his buddy, other, known ufologist, Gray Barker, who would also come and investigate, talk to these people. Like I said, they all finally kind of had somebody to report this stuff to. And then in December of 1967, the Silver Bridge collapses. The bridge connecting West Virginia to Ohio collapses. And the Mothman stories just stop. Nobody talks about it really. So after that point, Keel had such strange experiences. I mean, he would stay down there and he got all these weird phone calls in the middle of the night. A lot of weird static. He was being told by other local people in the area that different strange men sporting all black outfits were looking for him. He was having his own weird experiences, but he would get phone calls from locals at 3, 4 in the morning, and they'd be like, "Hey, there's a UFO right outside my house," and he'd jump in the car and he'd run over there and he'd go try to chase it. This was a very personal experience for him. So once the Silver Bridge collapsed, and he kind of started to move on to other things, he couldn't really get rid of the Ohio River stuff. So he spends a lot of time. He ends up writing the Mothman Prophecies, a book on his investigations into the phenomena. In the book, it doesn't just have Point Pleasant sightings or Ohio River sightings. It's got other sightings from all over the country. The original title of the book was The Year of the Garuda, because physically it looks very much like the Garuda from India, Indian folklore. Winged humanoids as a whole didn't start and stop, and between that 13-month period, they've always been around. Modern day, a lot of people refer to them as angels. You've got the La Lechuza in Mexican lore. It's everywhere. The Algonquins had the flying head. This is a phenomena that is as old as we are. It's always been around. It's just different people have called it something different. So it does go beyond the Mothman prophecies itself, but a lot of people just kind of know that story because they made a movie about it with, Richard Gere, and it got really popular. And so that's the story that people like to run with. But there's so much more to the lore.
Oh yeah, there was the MIB, Men in Black, was involved, trying to hush up the citizens. Indrid Cold shows up with his big old smile. So yeah, there's a lot to it. Yeah. And now Mothman is being seen all over, like Chicago, Illinois, Sacramento, California, all over the place.
Yeah, and
But
people,
it's not a monster and it hasn't killed anybody.
It hasn't killed anybody. Yeah, so far. Yeah. Hopefully, we think. I don't think he'd admit it if he did, though. You know what I mean?
Well, it's like Bigfoot. There's been stories about it stalking hunters, or harassing miners, that type of thing. The Jersey Devil, there's the stories we grew up about him murdering teenagers in the woods, because they were trying to have sex. Things like that. Kind of like the guy with Hook stories.
See a lot of murders, yeah.
Yeah, don't have sex in the woods. That's how you die, I guess.
Yeah. That's how you live too. But Ashley, what do you think about the Ohio Valley red-haired giants?
I'm not really too familiar with them, to be honest with you. I've heard a lot about giants in Ohio, but I haven't deep dived it.
Okay. God. Well, yeah, I mean, that's such an active area, so I wouldn't be surprised that you could, anything goes, like you said, with the Air Force Base. Um, so what's I guess what's the closest you felt of contact from an extraterrestrial or anything close to it, if
Um,
anything?
yeah. I can kind of share with you guys really what I'm working on now. It's with Injured Cold. So just the quick version of Injured Cold. Injured Cold is allegedly an alien from a planet called Lanulos. In the 1960s, he stops a man by the name of Woodrow Derenberger on a desolate road between Ohio and West Virginia and introduces himself. Indrid and Woody end up having this lifelong friendship. Woody goes on to say that, I mean, they're so close. Indrid is bringing his family down, and their families are having cookouts and stuff together and hanging out. Not just that, but Woody himself is going to Lanulos. Indrid is taking him to Lanulos, and he's been there. And he's got this, fantastic otherworld story that he's telling, and he's going around and giving talks on it. Um, Woodrow had a couple of kids that were present during all this. By the time I got into the investigation, Woodrow's dead. He died in the 90s. But his daughter, Tanya, she's still alive. And Woodrow did write a book about his experiences. Well, his daughter, Tanya, also wrote a book from her perspective of growing up with an alien in the family. This is Uncle Indrid to her. And so I wanted to talk to her initially because, of course, I'm looking into the Moth Man stuff, and you kind of can't do Mothman. I mean, you're gonna hit Injured Cold eventually. So here we are, and I start talking to Tanya, and I kind of get this idea that, look, if this injured guy is real, Tanya says Injured still visits her to this day, and he is very real, and they're very close. If I'm ever gonna meet him, it's gonna be through her. Let me befriend this woman. Let me show her that I am worthy of being introduced to her, alien uncle, right? Um,
Honest.
I mean, you do what you got to do for the weird. So I befriend this woman. And by the time I meet Tanya, Tanya had MS. She's very sick. And I actually didn't get to physically meet her until about a year of us talking on social media because she was just in and out of the hospital and it was during COVID. And, so it was terrible. We do eventually physically meet. And we become very close. I actually really get to know Tanya. We really genuinely become friends. And, she's offering to give me different things. She says she's got a picture of Indrid. Okay, but she just moved. And so everything's packed up. So she's got to get everything unpacked. All right. She's got all this paperwork from where her dad was evaluated. So one of the stories with Woody is that he was evaluated by a psychologist and cleared. But the psychologist says, I believe him about Indrid, not because I cleared him mentally, but because Indrid spoke to me telepathically and I know he exists. So you've got this medical professional putting his reputation on the line to vouch for this Injured Cold character. You've got all these random people who claim to have met this guy. And Tanya's got a paper trail a mile long proving it. So I want that paper trail. But again, like I said, she had just moved. She's sick all the time. They haven't unpacked anything. Unfortunately, May 2023, Tanya passes away. She dies. And right before she had died, I went. She was off of Facebook for a while, so and I hadn't heard from her phone. She always got a new phone number. She was, frankly, very poor. Someone's always stealing her phone, or she's selling it, or whatever, getting a new one. Her phone number is disconnected. So I go on her Facebook wall and I post, "Has anybody heard from Tanya?" One of her children contact me and they inform me she's okay, she's in the hospital. And then they just kind of trauma dump all over me. They're like, well, she's going to get out of the hospital and she's going to try to ask a bunch of people for money and she's probably going to start a GoFundMe and don't give her any money. Like, she's a scammer. Don't listen to her. And I'm like, okay, here it is, right? Finally, I'm going to find out that this whole story is just based off of money, right? So then she finally asked me, well, how do you know my mom? Because I'm a, decently attractive 30-something-year-old woman from Ohio. We have nothing in common. And I tell her, well, I'm interested in the Indrid stuff. And while her daughter is, like I said, telling me that her mom is such a horrible, scammy person, does not deny the Indrid cold story. She's just like, oh yeah, Indrid, that makes sense. And just goes on to, talk about their strange relationship. It was so bizarre. So Tanya dies, and I find out from the same daughter, she reached out to me. And I told her daughter, I want to talk to you about Indrid. I'm not going to do it right now. Your mom just died. I'm going to give you some space. Do what you got to do. And she's like, okay, that's fine. So I kind of start wrapping up my situation on Indrid. I'm writing a book on Indrid Cold. And I kind of on my own come to the conclusion that I believe Woodrow had an experience with Indrid. I didn't think Tanya did. I thought that maybe Tanya, this was some type of traumatic coping mechanism for her. The Indrid Cold stuff is what made her parents get divorced. And his wife publicly said it's not because Indrid's not real. He's been to my home. It's because I can't deal with the attention. I can't deal with him leaving for months at a time to go to this strange planet and not even be here to help me raise the kids. I mean, this whole thing is so deep. But to me, I think that the last time Tanya saw Indrid was when Woodrow died because he was allegedly at his funeral. And this is the conclusion I'm at because I've never talked to Indrid. I've asked Tanya different questions. If I ever had a question about Indrid, I would ask her directly. One of those things was his age. I would ask her repeatedly what his age was, and she would give me different answers. He was always somewhere between 90 years old and 110. And so I'm like, well, that's suspicious. That's if you could just talk to this guy telepathically, whatever, surely, that would be consistent. It's not. So that's my conclusion. And I'm okay with that. January of 2024, I get a very strange notification. Or no, I'm sorry. That didn't start in January. My show goes through a lot of changes. Okay, so I have a podcast on Wednesdays. We Talk Weird. My co-host, I had to fire him. I got a new one, which is Tobias Whalen, the guy currently researching all the Chicago Moth Man stuff. Great guy. And we start kind of talking about different ways to build the show. And one of the things we talked about doing was transforming the podcast to a video format. This is all relevant, I promise. And so we want to draw in a younger audience. And one of the ways we can do that is by utilizing TikTok. And so when we go video, we can make little video clips and put them on TikTok. Well, we're both old people. We're both millennials, but we're old. So we don't know how to use TikTok. I had created a TikTok when it came out. I had a login and stuff. So I decided, let me log back in and figure out how this works. So I do. I get on there to try to learn how to use TikTok. And a couple of months down the line, I get a weird notification. And it says, from TikTok, Tanya Derenberger and, 7 other people are following you. And I'm like, oh, that's strange. So I go and I pull up that notification. There is no recent follows from Tanya Derenberger. And I just kind of put it away and figure, hey, it's some type of glitch. I don't know how this works, whatever. But then about a month later, it happens again. And I'm like, okay. Now, since then, since I've been active on TikTok, I did have people that started following me. And I would just get a normal notification about that. But I get that Tanya Derenberger post again. And I go and I look. Tanya did have a TikTok that she made right before she died. She made it in February of 2023. She started following me then. She had my phone number, right? And that's how it's connected. She started following me back then. And it tells you that on the app. So I am scheduled to go give a talk at the Whitville UFO Festival in June. And I'm talking about Indrid Cold and my experiences with it all. So I go and I do that. And I tell everybody what I think about Tanya's, situation. But I do kind of mention the TikTok notification thing. So it was kind of weird, but I just kind of jovial about it. I'm like, oh, who knows what it is? Maybe it's Indrid. I don't know. Since then, I have gotten this notification no less than 20 times. I screenshot it every time it happens. Sometimes it happens 3-4 times a week. It keeps happening. I posted on social media asking people if they've ever had anything like this happen. They all suggest maybe it's a bot, maybe it's a scammer, maybe it's somebody who's I hijacked her profile. But then like I said, I go to the notifications. She's not unfollowing me and following me again. It says she followed me back in February 2023. I started messaging the account, and initially the first 3 messages I sent, I got an error message. It wouldn't send. I just had a successful send within the past month where it did go through. I just said hello ? It's not been read or anything. I'm not saying that this is Indrid. I don't know. People obviously, again, like I said, I don't believe ghosts are dead people. Some people think, well, maybe it's Tanya trying to reach out in some type of way. I can't say for sure, but it seems odd because this has definitely kickstarted my interest in trying to directly contact Indrid. and bypassed Tanya completely. And now all of a sudden I'm getting these weird notifications about that specifically. It's very strange to me. So that's probably the closest I've come to contacting an alien of any sort.
Yeah, that's a good journey though. I mean it's definitely a new modality. What do you consider for everything that you like? What do you consider the ultimate source of power? Is it a god? Is it an entity? Or is it a demon? What do you consider your highest source of power?
I guess I don't. Um, I don't know. When
You
I
don't?
had these weird experiences that happened to me, and I think about my life and I think about everything about it. I think about my career path. I think about different things that I've experienced that have kind of led me to where I am now. Like I said in the beginning of this, I did not choose this life. But I was absolutely guided here for some reason, and I don't know who's in control of that. I'd be silly to say that I believe in nothing, and I'm just going to be a pessimist and say that there's nothing at play here. But I don't want to give a name to it because I just honestly I don't know.
Yeah. If I say a prayer, I say to the God beyond conspiracies, or they know who you're talking to. It's beyond everything, these other constraints. But I do believe that a lot of people are just blindly out there serving different entities, powers with no authority, like don't know anything about it, like, and they could do a way deeper dive and probably find a greater source. And it is definitely inside yourself. Because if you're looking for something in the heavens, the birds might find it before you do, right?
Yeah, and no, absolutely. That's what I've always said. If I'm meant to know, like I mean, something in me would know. Just like I know that I saw the Mothman, right? Something in me just knows that that's what it was. So if
I
I
see what
found
you're
something
saying.
that resonated with me, I figured it would feel very similar to that. And I just haven't come
Yeah.
across that yet. I'm open to the experience. We'll see what happens.
Well, I'm like you in that regard as far as ufology. I didn't really start down that rabbit hole until like I saw something. But ever since I was little, Close Encounters, ET, all these things, when I was little, I couldn't really say that I had seen anything. So people would be like, "So what do you think about it?" I really believed it, but until I didn't want to lie and say I saw something to ruin the moment when I actually did. So it took like many years, but once it finally happened, then that moved me off the dime. So I understand what you mean. You have to see, it has to be something that really, you don't want to BS yourself.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I say, I get where the skeptics are coming from. I used to be one, and people that have met me now on this journey here don't understand that. How much I just didn't believe in anything that I couldn't replicate with science. And that's why I like to utilize science now. I'm still very skeptical of a lot of things. There's one woman that says Bigfoot turns into a mist and comes into her apartment and have tea together. I don't believe her. You know, just gonna be honest, I
Yeah.
don't. Um,
It's funny. It's funny that you said that because I used to work. Well, I'm retired now, but I used to work with California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So I talked to a lot of hunters, and some hunters said, "Yeah, I've seen Bigfoot while out there hunting." This one hunter, he told me that he actually shot Bigfoot, and Bigfoot turned into an explosion of sparks. And that was kind of interesting because a lot of people believe that Bigfoot is an interdimensional being that can go from its reality to our reality back and forth. It can go from energy to matter, back into energy. So if it did explode into sparks, that shows that it is an energy type creature. So it's kind of interesting.
I
Have
can
you seen
get
that new
behind
footage?
some of those ideas. I mean, and people don't like this either. But I believe that there are flesh and blood Bigfoot. And I refer to all this now as just the phenomena because I think a lot of it's connected. And I think that the phenomena is aware that we have stuff like legends of Bigfoot. And what it will do, much like the Men in Black, will try to look like a human, and they're really terrible at it sometimes. They just don't get our mannerisms and our culture. I think these things will try to replicate stuff like our lore and our culture in order to make you realize that you're having a weird experiences, but they don't quite get it right. So, which is why you have Bigfoot that disappears behind a tree, which is why you have Bigfoot carrying orbs or exploding into sparks. I think that there are people that are having those experiences. They're just not seeing the North American ape. Because here's what I've also found in talking to all these witnesses. When you're talking about a witness who has a cryptid encounter, and you're talking about one that has like maybe a paranormal or a ufological type of encounter, those people that have the more supernatural type encounters tend to have these consistently throughout their entire life. Whereas when you have a hunter that had a very strong stinky smell and then saw this, 7 foot tall ape walk through the woods, they usually don't have these encounters again. And that tells me that that's two different type of phenomena that's happening. But when you have somebody who sees Bigfoot carrying orbs and then goes home and has poltergeist activity, they end up having the same symptoms of that phenomena the rest of their life. And it's bizarre, but these are just patterns that for whatever reason nobody else is tracking. I don't know if it's ego, I don't know if it's lack of being able to think outside of the box. But this is the type of data that we need to have an eye on, I believe.
Oh yeah, definitely.
If you live near the woods and you have snow, heavy snow, you go up through some mountain passes and you see that the trees are snapped in a way that's beyond the snow. Like, it's kind of interesting. Are you like, is that the snow or is that Bigfoot? It's like fun to, but have you seen that new latest footage where they have this, it's a Bigfoot is lifting up. I mean, the tree itself that it's uprooting and what it's doing, the footage is really compelling. I don't know who put it out, but it's like, it's probably some of the best I've seen. It's just interesting, but it's going around the internet. They got him like pretty clear lifting up the stuff that he's uprooting, and how you look in the face looks really, really like you could the cheekbones, the nose, but the girth of it, even if it was a costume and the way it's moving, it's but I mean, who knows with special effects these days? So.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, and that's video and photographic evidence will never be enough to prove any of this. And I say that I believe that the Patterson-Gimlin film is 1000% a Bigfoot. I believe that. And, people, I've tried to argue with people about it. I have an offer right now. There's an offer to everybody listening to the show. If you can replicate the PG film with technology from that time, I'll pay for it.
Actually, I want to. You just brought up the most important point to chime in with you. When you look at YouTube or any video medium, I always tell my friends, and I learned this from UFOs. Hey, listen, if I saw a green UFO that maybe I saw 10 years ago and I've never seen it again, but I knew exactly how it looked, and then all of a sudden I go on YouTube one day and I see somebody else that has posted the same thing that I've seen, but he's like from North Dakota. Like, me and him can verify. I don't know where he got that footage from, but when I see it, I'm like, wow, okay, that's it. Now, between me and him, we have the truth. But other than that, unless somebody else, like you said, unless they post that same Patterson film, there's no way for you to really say,
Have either of you watched the whole documentary?
Just all the filming from that day?
It's been a long time.
Dude, the problem with that movie is, and it was a movie. It wasn't just a 5-second clip. It's that Patterson-Gimlin did like whatever the guy's name was, Patterson. He did a whole documentary movie about going up, and then part of the footage is the Bigfoot footage, but the beginning of it, or parts of it that show this, that he spends, I want to say maybe 5-6 minutes on these cute little like ground squirrels that are in it, right?
Yeah.
And they're real cute, and they had this great relationship between these two little, and he's just filming them, and then one of them gets run over, and then they show it being said, well, there were no vehicles out there except his vehicle. This asshole ran over that animal and then filmed that, it's so sad that, it was on purpose. It was intentional. It was like that Disney film where they filmed the lemmings going off the goddamn cliff.
Yeah.
This is no different than Thomas Edison electrocuting a fucking African elephant, to prove that alternating current is a dangerous current. You should use batteries for the rest of your life. The guy was a fucking showman. So, that's Nobody looks into
Well,
the background of the people. He had a motive. He had an absolute motive. So I do think that that film, in my opinion, was complete bullshit, and it fooled the world for a long period of time. I also think with today's deep fakes, you're never ever going to get anything that convinces anybody. So you're going to have to kill one of these things if they
That's true.
exist and drag in a body or capture one live. I don't want to kill the magic in the world, so I think it's quite possible that something exists out there, and I really hope there is. I want there to be. I hope we don't have to kill it to prove it. Maybe capturing it live would be nice, but you know, there's just been too many. There was some asshole in the 50s who bought a pet monkey from a store, shot the thing, shaved all of the hair off of it, and spray painted it green and left its body in the middle of a road in order to fake, oh, we found a man from Mars. You know, and you got to think back then in those time period, everybody's into, oh, the woke and you know, okay, everybody was such a horrible person back then. They kind of were in some ways. This whole thing about the greatest generation and all that horseshit, I know, and I loved my grandparents, but man, it was a different time, and people did some really rank shit, and like it was no problem. They had absolutely no respect for animal life or the planet at all because they almost destroyed the goddamn thing. It wasn't until Silent Spring in like 1973 that they even the movement to try to preserve what's left of this earth even started. So you got to take all of that shit. Look at the source. Where did it come from? These were not. Most of the time, they just weren't good people at all.
Oh, yeah, don't get me started on that topic. We did. I don't know if you ever heard of Xana the Bigfoot woman, but this is a story that's still passed around as legit in cryptozoology today. People use it as this is proof of Bigfoot. Yeah. Xana, the quote unquote Bigfoot woman, was not a Bigfoot woman at all. She was an African woman who they claimed was a wild woman that they would use for labor, and she was raped repeatedly. She birthed several children. We have DNA from those children. We know that they're all human. And they use this to try to capitalize, try to make cryptozoology into something it's not. And so I totally get where you're coming from. I mean, I'd be happy to come back on and talk about the PG film a little bit more on a different day, but you're right. We need to do better on our research and looking into the sources of where the stuff is coming from. And admittedly, that was my introduction into cryptozoology, was because Ray Wallace had died. And I read an article as a middle schooler that was talking about how Ray Wallace on his deathbed confessed to hoaxing all these Bigfoot tracks. And the reason Roger Patterson was in Bluff Creek is because Wallace had found tracks out there. So if the Wallace tracks were fake, does that mean the film was also fake? But people don't like to face the hard truths in this community. They want the magic and the fun, but you guys, it's fun and magical just on the facts alone. We don't need to fake it.
No, but
that's why I stopped following the Patterson story. That right there.
The one thing I will say in defense of the Patterson film, and that, like I said, the guy was a piece of shit, especially after I saw what he did with the squirrel thing on purpose. That bothered me, still does. But I have to thank, in one sense, that he made the movie, because if it wasn't for that and Leonard Nimoy and In Search Of, I mean, that was part of the magic of my childhood, was watching that stuff and and imagining, and it really made a child believing that it could be real, and those things helped, pass that on, made childhood a little bit better for me.
Anyway. $6 million man, no?
Yeah, that was great with Andre the Giant.
Andre the Giant was not. Actually, I do have a friend though that has he's the older guy that really is. I feel is really he's lit, as I would say. But he has a Bigfoot film where they're walking near. It's in area like San Bernardino, and it's carrying like a shiny object, and it walks almost like as if it disappears, because you see it go to where some higher rocks are, but nothing it could hide behind. It's really compelling. And then he had a photo where it looks like these orbs are around this baby. I guess you would call it a baby Bigfoot, but he would tell me for years, yeah, man, I got this, I have that. But the film was pretty compelling. It's like I said, it was filmed down the San Bernardino Mountains.
And also, seen that one.
Also, too, with the Patterson film, they used AI, artificial intelligence, to analyze the footage, and they degrained it, they stabilized it, and discovered that it was a fraud. It was a man in a gorilla suit. Yep.
It was for its time period. You have to admit it was good.
That was.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's so sad that there's so many people out there that do these fake UFO pictures and all this other crap.
Think about all the tourism that generated, though, especially a guy who faked all the prints and everything. How many of those plaster casts did he sell? How many people took their family vacation up there just to possibly glimpse it? You know, I mean, it stimulated the economy.
Oh yeah,
some people's wiring is just like that. They don't care. It just doesn't even bother them at all. Like for something, the wiring is just totally different to pull it off.
I think there's been a history of that. And the New Jersey Devil I grew up with was the same way. And there was a hysteria in the 30s where it broke out, and people would go on Jersey Devil hunts. They would come down from New York and go to the Pine Barrens, and it sold a lot of books, and it created had another reason for people to visit the Jersey Shore, especially in the wintertime when nobody was going there. So.
Yeah, and just amazes me all the different ledges. I mean, just like in California, you got the Napa Reeboks, and people flock over to this one street in Napa so they can see a flying monkey.
Well, hopefully they get their money's worth,
Yeah.
Do some wine tasting on the way.
I was going to ask Ashley, when you do your Bigfoot hunts, do you do wood-on-wood communication?
I'm sorry.
I haven't. I've never done the wood knocks. We've never gone out there screeching and hooting and hollering, even though allegedly one of the more famous Bigfoot sounds out there is the Ohio howl. I'm not personally impressed by it. No, we've never really done anything like that. Most of the time, we go out and, at minimum, we end up having a really good hike, right? At most, maybe we find some type of physical evidence. I've never found physical evidence. Maybe that'll change one day, but maybe I need to knock on some trees. I don't know. Maybe I'm doing it wrong.
Try something, new modalities. Like you said, you're experimenting. Well, there's a friend of mine that's on YouTube. Well, he's low key now, Christian, low key the man now. He lives in Granite Bay, and not far, but he had third generation film, infrared film of like clear craft that were coming down to Granite Bay. They would land, you could see them like floating, and he had all kind of stuff. But it wasn't until me and Paul went on an investigation, and there were these two girls. Their mother was like a white witch, and we were interviewing her. But she mentioned that her daughters and that they lived in Granite Bay. And so I asked her about UFO activity or aliens, what I heard, because it was really some strong film I had seen. I mean, some really good stuff. And she said, hey, well, ask them. They know all about it. Sometimes they may talk about it, but when I asked the two daughters, they were like maybe 28 and 31 at the time. With their children in their hand, like, and pretty serious. These are like some serious young ladies. They said, hey, we would sit on the porch and we would see these balls, these ships full of energy. He said, come down for a half hour or so sitting there. And they said they would get scared after they sit there, like they couldn't do it more than a half hour. And then one said that she saw what looked like things that zipped in a cloaking manner, like beings walking around actually using something to cloak themselves. But it's the same area that this guy sent me, real footage on. And it's like, and I haven't heard from him. And I figured, maybe he went too public with what he was doing, because he started having problems at his property. He started freaking out, talking about he wanted to fight anybody coming up here and ready. But he was a real nature guy. He would see stuff in the rocks, in the woods. He's really good. But his infrared footage of stuff coming down matched people that didn't even know him. When me and Paul did that investigation, it was compelling.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like the Whitville UFO flap. Like I said, I gave a talk at Whitville UFO Festival. They have it. It's in Virginia because they had a UFO flap that was happening in the 70s that was largely being reported by
Hmm.
one of the local radio DJs. Danny Gordon is his name. And they had a spot, I mean, pretty much a spot in town that you could go and you could see these UFOs. I mean, Danny was
Hmm.
able to go out and take pictures of them. And just as a community, they'd go out and go check out these UFOs. And that was happening for a solid year. And Danny, and again, this was the 70s. So
Yeah, it's the
it's,
70s, so you can't say satellite so much. It's
yeah,
hard to say 'cause it wasn't 5,000 satellites then. That's like Muhammad Ali saw them too.
yeah. I mean, right. And you don't have the internet then, right? So Danny takes these photos. You don't just have a camera in your pocket at all times. He takes these photos, and when he got the photos, that's when things started getting really strange for him. He had alleged out-of-town reporters that showed up to his house one time. They interviewed him for about 40 minutes. They wanted to see the photos. He showed them, they took pictures of them, and then they left. Well, he remembered the name of the publication they said they were from, and he had never heard about this interview being released. So he actually called the publication and they said, yeah, they don't work for us. So we never heard of them. But then
Wow.
his home started being raided. He would leave and come back, and his whole house had been ransacked. He would get weird phone calls from this guy who claimed to be on his side, but told Danny, if you don't stop looking into this, things are going to get really bad for you and your family. Danny ended up having a heart attack because of the stress of what was going on at the time, and he
Yeah.
never researched it ever again, never looked into it. He stopped talking about it completely until many years later when they had the first annual Whitwell UFO Festival, and he has been talking about it again. But let me tell you, he's an interesting guy. He's very much a very extremist religious type of person. We had a
Yeah.
panel with him, so we did a panel at the end of the day, and any like people, the audience would ask us questions, and anytime we'd try to answer, Danny would like go off. Like he would get the microphone and he'd be like, "No, you're wrong, and if you don't believe that these are demons and that you don't
He
believe in
thought
God,
everything
you don't
was
believe."
demons, huh? He thought it was all fallen angels, huh?
He was freaking out to the point to where they had to cut the panel short. It was the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen in my whole. I'm like on stage, horrified. Like,
Oh,
what is
geez.
happening? I know the event organizers personally. I'm looking
Funny
over
as
at the
hell.
guy and I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, I don't know.
No, you're wrong. The demons.
Like,
That shit is funny. That shit is funny.
But a lot of this phenomena, when people study it, when you look at, like I said, people that had come before us, they kind of go nuts. They kind of really do. When you look at like John Keel, he ended up becoming extremely religious, and he was not in the beginning of all this. But when you look at people that aren't into fringe topics, when you look at people that are in the heavy science, look at Einstein. Einstein also ended up very much struggling with mental health later on in his life.
Hey,
Um,
he's born on my birthday. I don't want to go crazy. Don't say that.
I'm just saying, stop looking into it. It makes you nuts. I read his autobiography, and man, he's so depressed and hates life, and it's horrible. And it's like you kind
March
of
14th. That's I mean, for you can have everything and then have nothing. I mean, you're a victim of your own mind for sure. I could tell you, I mean,
yeah.
the things you might want to think of, concepts, so and they say, Pisces, we're dreamers, they say all this, but we're supposed to be old souls, but it's the last stop on the zodiac. So we're feeling every emotion that's, any other Rubicon, Gemini, Sagittarius, we just go through it. So I mean, I could feel his pain. I've read it too. His wife is pretty smart too. She did a lot of his equations.
Absolutely. Well, they, I believe, they had a horrible divorce at the end of it because
yeah.
he turned into such an
Yeah.
asshole. But what this happens. This happens with people that end up taking on these kind of larger than life concepts, is that they tend to go off the deep end. And I don't know if it's just the desperation to find answers that you're never going to find. I don't know what it is. I don't know what makes them nuts, but God, we've seen it happen enough. It's kind of scary.
The person
You can
I
only
think
find
of,
out so much alive.
the person I think of going on the deep end as they got older was Al Capone. He acquired
that was syphilis.
Yeah,
and
good.
went into
Everybody
his
said that.
brain.
Was it truly that though, Phil? I never
Yeah.
really got to the bottom. Was it truly that? Do you think
Yeah,
did it?
Oh yeah,
It's syphilis. It rots the brain.
it rots the brain. Yeah.
Yeah. So that I guess it really did. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a place over here, Ashley. It's called Lawrence Livermore Labs,
Wow.
and it's in Livermore, California. And people on a nightly basis see UFOs. Well, HPI, my group, Halo Paranormal Investigations, we went to a camp out that was near Lawrence Livermore Labs, and some of my investigators saw UFOs out there. And in 1987, a UFO was hovering over Lawrence Livermore Labs where they make these super lasers. And one of those lasers shot down the UFO. And to cover it up and keep people away from where the UFO crashed at, they put all types of tires and set them on fire. So the smoke kept people away, and they were able to get the UFO debris off the land. And Lawrence Livermore Labs, the night skies, they say on a daily basis, and all the people of Livermore say they see UFOs.
I'm around there a lot.
Let me tell you something. So I mentioned earlier, I live about 10 minutes away from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I mentioned that I had talked to everybody that, that I can, that'll talk to me from there. Twice in my life, since I've lived so close to it, it's had a lockdown. And the very first time it happened, so it'll lock down and it's all over the news and nobody knows what's going on. And, we don't know. It's all speculation or rumor. The very first time it happened, and I'm not a big conspiracy nut, believe it or not, it happened on the same day that we had an active shooter locally. So it was locked down and people said that there was an active shooter on the base and that's what happened. Well, then a couple hours pass and they go, oh, okay, never mind. There is no active shooter. It was false alarm. Great. Later that night, in the Oregon district in Dayton, Ohio, they actually had an active shooter situation take place. I don't know if there's any connection there. I'm just stating the facts of what happened. Well, that part's not important. 2021, and this happened, I believe, it was 2019. I don't remember the year. It was before I did all this. It was before I got into this. 2021, I was set to go to West Virginia one weekend in September to the Raxi Bazaar. That's the Flatwoods Monster Festival. So I was going to be 3 hours away from home, Sutton, West Virginia, doing that. But the night before we left, Wright-Patterson, the base goes on lockdown. And so, again, the same rumor. It's an active shooter situation. That's what we're all being told. That's why it's locked down.
Wow.
And I kind of stayed up a little too late trying to wait. They're like, well, they're sweeping the NASIC building, which is their aerospace building. And they had swept it a total of 3 times, they said, but that was specifically the area that they didn't want anybody to go towards because that's where the active shooter was. And so while that's happening, people are texting me. People that live and work on the base are texting me and telling me that they have people blocked off from that area. You can't go to that area. You're locked down, so you're locked into where you're at. But people are seeing things, and what they're seeing coming out of the NASIC building are entire groups of troops and vehicles moving together in unison from one building to another. And eventually they do lift the lockdown. Now they ended up saying, guess what? Again, false flag. This lockdown happened for like 9 hours. And they swept that NASIC building 3 times. And I've got reports from people telling me that they're seeing a whole group of somebody covering something, moving it somewhere else. I don't know what it could have been. But, kind of just using what we already have, around us, just using military vehicle and troops or tires for that matter, seems to be pretty damn effective. It's very simple, but very effective. So you know what? I believe it.
Okay.
I want to thank you, Ashley, for coming on tonight. Sorry, Zandine, we're about 30 minutes
good.
over our normal run time. Again, thank you, Ashley. I think we could probably keep going for a couple hours if we wanted to. But my dogs are looking at me like, are you ever going to let us out again?
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. I mean, I'll come back on. We can pick a topic and run with it, whatever you guys want to do.
Okay.
Awesome. All right,
Check out
everybody.
Northern Perjurum in the 7-foot aliens that came to the Alameda Naval Base. Real story. You might like that one.
Oh gosh, I got so much homework to do tonight, you guys.
Anyway.
Hey, just be careful with Indrid Cold.
What's that?
Indrid
Cold. Be careful with Indrid Cold.
Yes, absolutely. Hopefully we make contact and there's an update there sometime. Hopefully I get to shake his hand.
Yeah,
That's my goal.
yeah.
Well, come back on the show when you do that, please.
Sure. I'll bring him on with me.
That'd be great. All right, everybody. Thanks again. Have a great night.
All
Thank
right.
you, Zadine. Thank you, Paul.
gentlemen.
Thank you, Ashley.
That was fun. Good night.
Thank you, everybody.